I really want to talk about what's changed. When I started on Android 5.5 years ago, companies didn't even know, should I build an Android app? That was a question I would get a lot. Should I build an Android app, right? The world has evolved, the platform is much bigger, and now I never get that question anymore, which I'm really happy about. But what I will say that I'm not as happy about is that I see a lot of people telling me, hey, my Android app, it's doing well, I'm getting some progress, my revenue's coming in, but I wish I had known A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H before I started on Android, because I'd be so much better off. And so working with Gus, we decided to start doing these presentations. And I really hope that this presentation is going to be as boring as possible. I hope the material here is 100% remedial, that you walk out of here and go, oh, I wasted my time. Because if you did, it means we're doing a good job in terms of getting information out to you and making sure that everyone who starts on Android has as much information as possible. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is people come to me after the talk and they tell me that they learned at least one new thing, and so I know that our work is not done and we have to keep giving these presentations. Sorry, Gus. Sorry, Shabi. So let's hope that this year can be a new leaf and it will be boring for you. So I want to get started by doing a poll here. What phone are you carrying with you today? Who's carrying an Android phone? Okay, that's pretty cool. How about an iPhone? Okay. How about a smartphone that's not one of those two? Okay. Sometimes we get a hand, and then I have to ask, how about a feature phone? Anyone kicking it super old school? No? And anyone with a no phone today? Did you hear this thing they had on Kickstarter? It was actually called the no phone. It was like a block of plastic that you could hold with you. It was like the size and shape of a phone, but it was not a phone. It was really interesting. So anyway, I like doing this poll because one of the things that's interesting to see is working here in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley, we see kind of a different distribution of phones. We actually saw a lot of Android here today in this audience, which is super cool, but sometimes we don't. And if you do go and look at the data, Android has a pretty substantial market share here in the US, also in Europe, in Asia, Latin America, Africa, and other markets. So it's really important to make sure that you understand this market, and I know that a lot of you do. And the reason Android's gotten so successful is it's really flexible, and that means that you can make the best possible phone out there for basically anyone in the world, whether that's a person who likes all the flashiest, latest stuff, or maybe you're just getting started, it's your first phone, and you barely saved up enough money to get a smartphone. And that's cool. That's really interesting. And in addition to all devices coming in all shapes and sizes, we also have launches. So is anyone here in the room planning a launch of a new app anytime soon? Okay. How about you just launched an app, a new app recently? A couple people. And is anyone planning a major update to their app? Cool. That will probably keep happening. So no matter what type of launch you're working on, we want to make sure that you have, as I mentioned before, all of the information so you can make the best possible plans with how to be successful. And so what I'm going to do today is talk about how Android and Google Play can help you across 3 different areas. First, we're going to talk about how Android and Play can help you gain reach and achieve global scale all over the world, tons of different people, big market. Next, we're going to talk about how to build a high-quality app using Android's tools. And then finally, we're going to talk about iterating and managing your launch on Google Play. So I'm very excited about these slides because our amazing team redid them, and they have a cool new space theme today that I'm very excited about. So this is really cool. So where I'm going to, I know, and I was just in Southern California, and you can see the stars in the middle of Joshua Tree, and it's cool. So the reason we have a space team is that when you start a company, you have like a really big vision, right? You talk about that. And if I wanted to take the analogy one step too far, I would even say that you might be reaching for the stars with your company. But that would just be cheesy, so I'm not going to say that. But what I will say is that tech pundits have been telling us for a long time that mobile is eating the world, right? It's amazing. If you look at the penetration of smartphones here, if you can see this in the back, here we have the world's population, the population over 16, mobile users, and smartphones. And this is growing. So actually, we're getting very close to a universally accessible tech product. And the reason that this is so important is it used to be if you wanted to get out a product or business globally, it was hard. Now what do? Typey, 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 press a couple buttons, and congratulations, you have a scaled global business. There's really never been anything like that in the past. And so it's totally new in our uncharted territory. And let's talk for a minute about the size of Android and Google's platform. So first of all, on Android, we have over 1.4 billion users that are active in a 30-day period. We also have 1.5 million Android devices being activated daily, 400 plus OEMs making Android devices, and over 500 mobile carrier partnerships. So that's pretty big. And then Google Play, it's been around for only 5 years, and it's already helping developers building successful businesses. So we see over 1 billion users actively visiting the Play Store every month, 65 billion plus downloads in the past 12 months, over 1 million apps available on the store. And one of the new areas that we're really excited about is this idea of emerging markets. So think about places like India, Brazil, Indonesia, Nigeria. What we're seeing there is actually a huge amount of accelerating interest in not only downloading apps, but also starting to make purchases. So the opportunity is huge. There are entire user bases out there that are hungry for content. It's not a future thing anymore. It's already happening today. And Google Play allows you to gain access to those businesses. And let's talk a little bit more about how we make those businesses happen. So in the past 12 months, we actually enabled 61 new forms of payment spanning 32 markets. And that means that 400 million additional people in the past 12 months actually have access to a form of payment on Google Play. So this could be something like adding a credit card to their account, but in many of these markets, it doesn't mean that. It might mean a gift card for someone who doesn't use credit cards, or it may be paying through what we call direct carrier billing, which is where your Google Play purchases are charged directly to your mobile phone plan. And so that means just more people, they're ready, willing, and able to make purchases. And that was reach. We talked about the global business. That's the user base you can address. And a lot of people ask me, Ellie, okay, tell me the secret. What is the secret to building a successful business on Play? And it's not really a surprise. The thing you must absolutely start with is a high-quality app that you build on Android. And people tell me a lot, well, that's harder on Android, right? And let's talk about that openly, right? What does that mean? If you want to build a high-quality app on Android, it doesn't have to work on like 5 phones. It has to work on a lot more than 5 phones. And that is more challenging, right? If you want to reach over 1.4 billion people, you're going to need to make sure it works on all their devices. So we want to talk through basically how you can meet users' ever-increasing expectations of app quality, but also have it work across that broad range of devices. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what's available to you to help you build those high-quality apps. So first of all, has anyone heard about the latest announcement we just made around Android O, the developer preview? Has anyone heard of it? Yeah, a few folks? I was just talking to someone about it right before we got started here. So we just announced it recently. For the past couple years, I've been really happy to see that we've been doing a developer preview. That is before we actually start rolling out a new operating system version to users. We actually allow developers like you to download it, try it out, give it feedback, tell us what you like and don't like, try to break it, all that good stuff. And we also give you a chance to start building new features. We would love to see more and more developers making sure that when we do start rolling out Android O to more consumer devices, that you have your apps updated and ready to go. So we'll talk about a couple of features here really quickly. So I use Android every day. It's my primary phone. The two things I'm the most excited about are the notification channels. You know, people these days get a lot of push notifications. You've probably seen it from talking to some of your users. It's like kind of hard to manage it. So we're introducing a new feature called notification channels that helps you kind of better organize them and help users kind of manage through all the notifications they have. And then secondly, one of the things users want the most from their Android device is long battery life. So we're working on putting in place some limits to help apps save battery and make sure that users can get the most out of their device. So the good news that means for you is if the user can keep using their phone for more of the day, that means more time spent scrolling through your app, playing your games, and all that sort of good stuff as the device becomes more efficient. We also have picture-in-picture, autofill APIs, and then also icons that can adapt to look cool on different device types. So if you haven't already, definitely give it a download, give it a try, let us know what you think. Has anyone here heard of material design? I hope this is like almost everybody. So if you haven't heard about it, just in case, it's a set of design principles that we use on Android to basically determine how apps look, feel, and move. And we talk about words in material design, things like tangible surfaces, rich imagery, bold colors, and motion that provides meaning to your apps. We've seen over 1 million apps on Google Play that are using material design. And one of the things I think is most important to understand is why material design? Is it just something that Google wants app developers to do? Why would we want that? And the reason for that is we actually find that when a user downloads a new app, one of the things that can cause them to get frustrated and just toss that app right out of the bat is, I can't figure out how to use it, right? You see a lot of apps introducing tutorials and other things, but we find that with a material design layout, the user already has a mental model of how an app should behave, and they can just take that framework and apply it to a new app. And what this means is they'll have a much more meaningful first session, and we see increased engagement scores after that. So that's been something that's really important. Because users are used to the material design model, it's kind of what they expect from the next app that they're going to download. So let's talk about an example of an app that implemented material design and how it helped them. So Bring is a company based in Switzerland that allows you to create shared task lists. Things like, maybe you live with a bunch of housemates or spouse or family. You want to keep a shopping list, so it helps organize these things. And there's a lot of cool things you can do, like not just sharing the lists, but also sending last-minute requests. Maybe your spouse is at the grocery store, and you can say, hey, don't forget that one last thing. And so they implemented material design, and the main thing that they tried to do with it was they had a lot of common actions that they wanted to make accessible from every screen within the app. So they used an extended material design toolbar to introduce common elements like the drop-down menu here, search, messaging, et cetera, and make them universally accessible from all screens in the app. And that was cool, and they implemented it, but what you really care about is numbers. So this is what they saw. When they changed from their prior layout to the material design layout, they saw a 66% increase in session time, and they also got featured on the Material Up blog as well. So this is a nice example of how something that looks like just a visual change actually can have a significant change in the engagement metrics for your app. And we see a lot of developers really happy that they did make that change because users are able to find the stuff that they think is most important. And what we really think is happening when people do a material design refresh is it causes folks to get together and say, well, what are the most important actions in our app? And how can we focus our app most efficiently around just those actions? And that usually ends up with an app that's faster and simpler to use. And so those were the basics about material design, but the thing we're most excited about right now is motion. And in material design, motion can be something that's very important to help users understand as they transition from one screen to the next, right? Maybe you're displaying a list of tracks to an album, and then a user wants to zoom in on just one track and then move back. Motion can help provide visual transitions that helps the user understand as the app moves from state to state. It's also fun, right? Motion can be quirky, it can provide personality and delight. So it's a great chance if you aren't already working with a motion designer to get assistance from one, and it can make your app feel really fresh and dynamic and very 2017. So now let's talk about Android Studio. Does anyone know if they or their team is using Android Studio? A few folks? Yeah. So when we first created Android Studio, the thing that we wanted to do was to create a purpose-built IDE that was all about Android, something that felt native to the platform and was really well-tuned for the use cases that Android developers run into the most. And in the short time that we've had Android Studio, it's actually built a lot of momentum. So we're seeing that 92% of the top 125 apps on the Play Store are actually using Android Studio. And we also see not just the top apps, but millions of developers all over the world doing that as well. So this is a quick history lesson of Android Studio. We talk about three main themes. So speed, how do we make it faster to do that? Build run cycle. Smarts, how do we help your app be more efficient to save APK size, to make beautifully designed screens? And then finally, platform support. How do we make a tool that can help you get the most out of the latest versions of the Android operating system? So it's a lot. I won't go into it too much. But I do want to zoom in a little bit to our latest release, which is Android Studio 2.3. The thing we're most proud of for this release was the quality improvements. We heard from developers that you really wanted to have better reliability, more speed, and just everything like work just a little bit better. And so that was the main focus for the release. But we did add some new features as well. So we added updating WebP support for your app images. If you are using constraint layout to manage the layouts of your app, we added some new tooling there as well with the library support and the widget palette. And then if anyone is using the APK URL analyzer, the App Link Assistant can help you understand all the different URLs that your app is pointing to and to manage them more efficiently. And then finally, for any of you who are using the Android emulator to test your app, we've made some improvements there. Over the past couple of years, we've really tried to speed it up, and now we've actually added full copy and paste support. Okay, so you built your app. You think it's high quality, but who actually determines what high quality is? Well, it's actually your users. And we were trying to understand, well, what is it that users associate with high and low quality? So what we did is we took some of Google's machine learning technologies, and we actually analyzed all of the English language reviews in the Play Store. And we found some interesting stuff. So we looked at apps where you could identify some sort of topic in the review, and we found out that when there was a 1-star review, about 50% of the time, the user mentioned some sort of a stability issue, like a crash or other type of bug. And then for 5-star reviews, 60% of the time, there was some mention of speed, design, or usability of the app. So what we can really see here is the secret to getting 5-star reviews is basically don't have stability issues or bugs, and then try to make your app as fast, as beautiful, and as easily usable as possible. So it's not super specific, which is why, maybe not super surprising either. Shabi's giving me that look like, Ellie, this is pretty basic. So we did then say, well, what is the specific advice for each different app? So we actually have a tool in the Google Play Developer Console where we take our machine learning again, deploy it against your app's particular reviews, and then it'll show you certain things. Like in the left column here, you can see what are the particular topics that people are mentioning when they're talking about your app. And then also, what's the average rating of those reviews, how many times it was mentioned, and then also what's the cumulative mention effect of that particular term on your app's rating. So you can see in certain cases, a certain term may be associated with a much higher or much lower score. So if there's a certain feature or issue that's really pulling your ratings up or down, you can do that. And that can be really helpful to help you prioritize things like what should I have my team work on next, whether that's correcting problems or maybe working on the new features that are really getting good feedback. Now I want to talk about the challenges that are specifically associated with Android's multiple OS versions and screen sizes. So this is definitely a problem, right? Like you have a lot of versions. And if you want to reach 1.4 billion plus people, you need to sort of figure out, well, where do I want to be in terms of which Android versions to support, or maybe which screen sizes I want to have my designers optimize for. So we actually offer a dashboard. Here's the URL, where you can go and look up and see what the distribution looks like. And one caveat you should take into account. If you're mostly developing your app for, let's say, high-end devices in developed markets like, let's say, the US or Japan, that's going to tend to have newer devices, later versions of Android, and you're also going to tend to see higher spend on those users. However, if you have an app that's targeting more emerging markets, that's when you're going to see typically older Android versions coming up. But one of the things about Android is we've always had this device diversity as part of our heritage, right? We've always tried to be the phone that can be right for everyone around the world. So we've designed all of our tooling and our operating system, our support libraries, et cetera, so that you can kind of cope with this better. We're always looking for more feedback on how we can do this better, what sort of issues you're having, et cetera. But we want to make sure that tooling does help you and make it more efficient for you to optimize across different devices. So this is a question I always like to ask. Does anyone have in their company somewhere a drawer or a closet full of Android phones? Yeah? Do you ever wish that you didn't have to have that? Or maybe that it could be like a half drawer or like 2 closet shelves or just somehow like reducing the amount of clutter of Android devices? Well, that's something we hear a lot. Actually, one of my friends who's here today used to tell me, like, you have to help me deal with this. I'm a startup. I can't afford all these phones. And so one of the things that we're working on, we launched a while back, was this thing called Firebase Test Lab. So what we did is we took a Google data center, we filled it full of some of the most popular Android devices, and we tried to do this basically so that you don't have to do this, at least not as much. And you can write automated tests across your different common flows in your app, whether it's creating a new object or whatever. Identify what those common flows are, record them, and then play them back across a bunch of devices. And with this, we find a lot of teams are able to reduce the amount of bugs that get found post-launch and find them much earlier, and sometimes they're just able to bring down their QA costs by, rather than having a bunch of manual testers, be able to move to a slightly more automated testing. Other folks say that they're able to expand the portfolio of devices they're testing on, right? If you're a small company, maybe you can only afford to test on a handful of devices, at least for minor updates. but now maybe you can expand that a little bit more. So if you want to get started with Firebase's test lab for Android, the best way to do it actually is to go to the Google Play Developer Console, and we actually have something called the pre-launch report. This is something that's, number one, totally free. All you have to do is upload your app to an alpha or beta test in Google Play. There's a little setting where you have to switch this on. And it will basically allow you to test your app on a whole range of Android devices that are running in our data center. And you get back reports like this. Like this one is showing you crash issues. It can also do other things like showing you screenshots. So for example, you can see what your app might look like visually on a range of different screen sizes, or a range of different Android versions or languages. So like, for example, in this screenshot here, you can see for a certain language here, this is a German UI, and it's actually much longer than the space that was allocated, so it's producing some layout issues. So this is a nice case where maybe you don't have a huge amount of resources yourself to go and test on so many phones and so many languages, so you can just let us do it. And we try to find similar screenshots and kind of cluster them so it's easier for you to go through all those different test results. Has anyone here heard of Firebase? We had a big announcement about that last year. So Firebase was originally kind of a Google backend service only, but today it's really expanded to be everything that you need to be a developer cross-platform. So we know that as developers, you don't just build for Android, you build for all sorts of platforms. And you have a whole bunch of different important stuff you need to do. Everything from developing your app, to growing your business, to making money. And so what we're trying to do is to bring all those tools together in a really easy way so that you can basically do everything. We don't want you to have to use multiple SDKs from Google to manage a bunch of it. We want to make it much easier for you. Also, Firebase works on iOS as well as Android. So if you're looking for analytics or other tools from this offering, it's a good place to get started. And let's talk a little bit more about Firebase Analytics. This is kind of the core of our offering that ties everything together. It was designed by the Google Analytics team, actually, but they decided to just sort of start over and design it from scratch, really based around what it's like to be a mobile developer. Google Analytics was popular on the web as well, but this is really an app-centric experience. And it allows you to see things like how app users behave, where they're coming from, and it's a great sort of advisor, I guess you could say, around trying to help grow your business and measure user performance. Another thing that we think is really critical is we see that the most successful developers have a crash reporting tool of some sort, and Firebase also provides Firebase Crash. This helps developers diagnose and report on issues. You definitely don't want your users seeing those sorts of reports in their one-star reviews on the Play Store. You want to find out earlier, and then by having a crash reporting tool, you're able to dive deep into exactly what those crashes are that are happening and how you can fix them before they get out of hand. Okay, so we built a high-quality app. We just talked about the challenges for that, as well as the new tools that we have available. And your final step is basically to plot your launch trajectory for your new app or update. And the Play Developer Console is a place where you basically monitor and manage all of that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. So when you're launching on Google Play, one of the most important things to keep in mind is, again, it's all about what the user thinks about your app. It's this idea of how to incorporate user feedback as often and early as possible into your whole app launch process. And different developers do this in different ways, but this is kind of how we think of it. Maybe you do a beta test early on, then you do a soft launch, a full rollout, and then it's kind of in its like ongoing update phase when it's fully live. And you can think about this cycle repeating then. Maybe you do this again with a whole nother app, but maybe you do it again with an update to that app as well. So we see developers going through that process again and again, and we had gotten some really clear feedback from all of you that you wanted that process to be easier. And so some of the top things that we had gotten feedback were that you wanted to have your status of like, is this thing live or not, or what situation is it in, a lot clearer than it was. So we did that. We have clear color coding and terminology to describe exactly what situation all of your APKs or releases are in. You also know that launching an app or pushing live a new update is really scary. You wanted to see more confirmation. So we've added more like, are you sure buttons throughout the UI to make sure that it doesn't feel scary anymore. And you also wanted to see more history and be able to see exactly what had happened in the past, especially with multiple people managing releases. And you also wanted to be able to download older versions of your APK. So all those things are possible. We recently rolled this out a few months ago, and we've been happy to see that the feedback is that we've largely addressed any feedback, but we'd love to keep hearing from you about how we can make it even better. So we talked a little bit before about how there's different stages to your launch. And let's talk a little bit more about how it could work. So this is just one example, maybe from a game, let's say. And so when you're at the beginning, what getting user feedback might look like is what we call a closed beta. So maybe you have an app, you want to have it tested by a group of people, but only the people you say can have a look at it. Maybe friends or family, a couple of investors, something like that. Then maybe next you're ready for an open beta. You want to be able to get a little bit more feedback. That can be a good chance to test it in some kind of, let's say this is a game, it's some basic game mechanics, see if it's working or not. And then finally, when it's going well, you want to maybe test in a few more countries, get international feedback, and then start tracking really key metrics around monetization. So when you're ready to go and do these updates, one of the big things we've heard from developers is you don't want your app to go out to like everyone all at the same time, because that's scary. So a few years back, we introduced a feature called staged rollouts. The whole idea is that when you have a new update to push, you don't push it to everyone on day one. And actually, this is how Google now does all of our app rollouts on Play. You want to roll it out gradually. So we allow you to set your app to go out to a fraction of users and then increase that over time. Then if you run into any sort of issue while your rollout is happening, you can pause it immediately. No one else will get your app after that, your app update, that is. And then you can push a new version so you don't have anyone getting a broken version as soon as you're aware of an issue. And this can be really helpful, especially if you start to get a larger user base or if you're rolling out into any new countries where maybe you didn't have as much feedback or testing before. So one of our most popular features on Google Play is this thing we call beta testing. Beta testing is really important because you get your feedback early. I don't know if any of you were early adopters of Gmail, but at Google we got really famous for like beta testing everything. That's what we like to do. So we wanted all of you to be able to do that as well. So we see 60% of our top 1,000 apps are running beta tests right now. That's not ever, that's like right now. And what they've told us is really helpful about this is you can get that feedback about how is my app doing? Is the quality high enough? Are there any bugs? Do people like the new features? And you can get that feedback in a controlled environment. People can send it directly to you. They're not leaving you a 1-star in the Play Store. And then when you're ready, you can roll it out to more people. So let's talk a little bit more about what those options are. So we talked a little bit about how sometimes you want to do a closed beta versus an open beta. So if you're early on, you may just want to specify a certain set of users, maybe by their email address, so you can create a Google group or Google Plus community. Once you're ready to be more open about it, they can actually opt in from your Play Store listing page. And then, while you're in a beta period, users can actually leave you feedback through the Play Store, but that feedback actually is private to you, and it doesn't affect any public ratings at all. And let's see. We were having so much interest in beta testing that we were thinking, like, how can we do more? We started talking to startups, and they would say, well, your beta testing feature sounds really cool, and I bet it's useful to people who have an established user base. But what do you do for a startup like me? How do I even know where to find beta testers? And so we started thinking about it, and we realized, well, we have all these people in the Play Store who are early adopters and are really excited to try the latest, greatest stuff, things that are still in development. What if we kind of merge those two? We bring together our companies that are working on new stuff that's still in development with sort of people who are interested in that, whether that's just someone who likes to try the greatest game while it's still being developed, or maybe even a journalist or someone who likes to be on the bleeding edge of tech. So we have a special section in the Play Store. It's called Early Access. If you do have an app or game that's coming up that you'd like to have featured, please go to startonandroid.com. Let us know, and we'll see if we can work with you to get it some exposure. Okay, so you've invested so much in making sure you've gotten that user feedback, you've iterated on it, and you want to make sure that your marketing is going to really do well. And one of the things that can be tough for a developer is, a lot of people, once you start expanding, are going to see your page in the Play Store, and that's going to be the only thing they know about your app, right? You aren't there to sit there and tell them about it. So you want to understand, how can I make my Play Store listing as good as possible? So we actually developed a feature because we're Google, we like to test everything, and we wanted you to be able to do the same as well. So we created something called store listing experiments. The whole idea here is that you can run experiments testing several different versions of your store listing, and then you can use that information to optimize it. And this is so critical because if you think about your whole conversion funnel, right? Maybe you're running ads, and then people go to your store listing page, and then they install it, and then they launch the app, and then they engage, and then maybe later they start spending money or viewing ads, right? And if the store listing right at the top, it's like right at the top of the funnel, and if people are really not responding well to that store listing, it can kind of impact your entire business down below. So if you get that store listing really optimized and really effective with users, and you find marketing messaging or graphics that really resonate with them, it can actually have the opposite effect and have your business really take off. So we really wanted to allow you to do this. So basically, here's how it works. You don't need to do any coding. All you need is a graphic designer and a couple of good ideas. And you can basically test all these major fields on here. So everything from the video, the icon, the screenshots, the text description, et cetera, and just try different versions and see which converts the best. So we're going to talk through a couple of different examples of developers who've tried this. So here's a couple of games companies. So we had Flare Games. They're the maker of Royal Revolt 2. And they did an icon test and actually had a 30% increase in installs just from that. Like, that was probably worth their time. You know, if you were going to run a big marketing campaign and you knew that, like, if you waited a week, you could get 30% more, like, you'd probably want to do that. And then also we worked with eRepublic Labs. They said, well, one experiment is good, how about 11? So they actually ran 11 different subsequent experiments, and they saw between a +5 and +29% gain in each experiment. And so that's another example where one is good, why not try iterating and see where you could end up? This had a pretty big cumulative impact on their business. And here was another approach. Mixi, they were the makers of Monster Strike, a really popular game in Japan. They said, well, we want to bring Monster Strike to the US. But they knew, because they were not their first rodeo, that basically the sort of art and the sort of descriptions of games that resonate with users in Japan may not resonate here. And rather than just hiring a translator and copying over the same graphics, they really wanted to do it right. So they had a very methodical, scientific way of testing each different part of their store listing in the US with different versions. And they were able to tweak the text, the graphics, the particular pieces of gameplay they were featuring. And it was totally worth their time because overall, through all of this scientific experimentation across about 2 months here, they were able to increase their installs by 68% on Google Play. That's nearly doubling their business, and that's just by running a series of experiments. And if they had just gone through that first step, well, you know, the gains would be much more modest for them. So this was a great idea of showing how you can actually test how well your messaging or your app or your graphics resonate in different markets across the world. You can both run experiments globally as well as country-specific. And then here's one final example. So Rovio was going to launch Angry Bird Transformers, and they just wanted to share with us the specific tests they run on each of their icons. So initially, they weren't really sure what concept they wanted to use, so they tested 4 very different options. They saw that this final one was already producing a 7.2% increase. And then they said, well, what are some other things that we could change? If this is sort of a good general concept out of these 4, what else can we do with it? So they tried, you know, different tilts and different background colors, and they found out that the one with the head pointing upward did better than the previous one. And they said, well, then let's see, do people like a blue background or do they like something else? Not every experiment is going to have a positive answer. Sometimes it is the control that was the best. Blue beat out yellow, red, and striped, so that was what they went with. And then if you look at the cumulative gains across that, that was pretty significant. And so they actually told us, you know, this is one of the reasons we want to go to Google Play first, is so that we can test out, we can take these learnings, and then we can apply that across other platforms as well. So it's a lot to keep track of when you have an app on Play. So one of the things we did more recently was announce the Play Developer Console app. You can carry it with you. It helps you keep tabs on your app. You can do everything from getting notifications if something unexpected happens, to replying to user reviews. Or if maybe you have a VC meeting coming up with Shabi or someone else, you can be like, look, I got more installs. I made revenue. I got it right here. I don't have to get my laptop. So that's handy. We wanted you to have that. So I have one more topic before I finish today, which is Android Instant Apps. Has anyone heard of Android Instant Apps, by the way? A couple folks? If you haven't, this is sort of the problem that they were trying to solve, right? Like, apps are really cool. We all know why they're cool. But there's this speed bump, right? You have to install it. You're like, I really want that app. Oh, I have to do that extra step. And a lot of people do that extra step. But wouldn't it be great if you could just get a link to something and you could just tap on it and then be in that new experience right away without having to wait for a download or agreeing to permissions or any sort of bump. And that's cool. So you think first yourself, well, okay, we have the mobile web right in the cartoon. But one of the things that's interesting is there's actually a lot of good reasons to bring your user into an app experience as opposed to mobile web. And here's an analysis that was done by Criteo. They looked at mobile browser versus app. They looked at the number of products viewed per user, the add to basket rate, and the checkout rate. And they found substantial increases in the performance in an app versus in a mobile website. And that can be for a lot of different reasons. Maybe the experience is richer. Maybe that's because payment details are easier to come by. Whatever it is, the user is definitely having a more engaged experience in the app. So how do you balance that with the kind of install speed bump? Well, we said, what if we don't like compromises, so can we just skip that part? So what we looked at was Android Instant Apps. So the whole idea is that you can just tap on something, and then you're in the app experience without the install. So we announced it last year. There was a lot of different examples we've shown. This is one I like that shows B&H Photo, where you can basically add a camera. You search for a camera, you find it, you add it to your shopping cart, and you pay. You're in an app experience the whole time, but you didn't actually have to perform an install. There's no trip to the Play Store. It just happens. And so let's look at those. Another example here. So this one here is a BuzzFeed video. And there's some important examples here. So one of the things we talk about with our early access partners is how do you get started with instant apps? Well, we ask you to think about what is the little micro chunk of your app experience that is so magical that if someone could just get right into that, it would just be perfect. So in the photo case, it was pretty obvious because it was like someone sends you a camera and you can just buy it. You don't have to download and download and download and then buy it. You can just buy it. So that example may depend on yours. So in this example here with BuzzFeed Video, maybe someone sends you a link to a video. You can just get right into that app experience. And then there you are. Now, in the world of instant apps, we wanted to make sure that the user was able to download the app. And you can do that. But the great thing with instant apps is that download doesn't have to occur at the beginning. It can occur anytime in the app experience. Maybe you decide, if you're BuzzFeed Video, that you want that download to happen after the user's watched 3 videos. Maybe you want to have it at a different time. Maybe you want to personalize it for the user. Maybe you want to have it always available but never pushing the user to do it. It's really up to you, and you can experiment with different things. So if the user does do the install, it's just an app that gets installed on their home screen just like anyone else. But it just, again, it doesn't have to happen at the beginning anymore. There's no trip to the Play Store, no permissions, nothing heavyweight like that. Yes. I wanted to leave all of you with this. So there's a lot of tips here. There's a lot of information. We hope, again, that it was as redundant and boring as possible and that you already knew everything. But if there's anything that you wanted to refer back to, we highly recommend that you go to startonandroid.com. You can get a bunch of information. And also, if you do have a big launch that's coming up, a new app, a major update, if you're interested in getting more exposure through the Play Store, let us know. Don't let us know the day before it's going to come out, but let us know and we can work with you and even give you tips and tricks and making sure that you're getting the support that you need to be successful with your launch. So here's a quick summary of what I talked about today. So we talked about how Play and Android can help you get global scale. We talked to you about how Android has a whole bunch of different tools that can help you work with all the different devices that Android runs on. And then finally, we talked about how you can stage your release on Google Play, starting small, going big, and how you can iterate, repeat, use user feedback, and build a better and better app with better results. And then finally, we talked about instant apps. It's starting to roll out now. If you're particularly interested in it, let us know. And that's it for me. Thank you.